The cabin lights of Flight 273 shimmered softly against the clouds outside, the engines humming with that steady rhythm that makes people drift into half-sleep. In seat 16, sat an old man, wrinkled hands, quiet eyes, and a presence so ordinary that no one looked twice. He wore a simple brown jacket, a pair of worn-out boots, and a small cap with no markings. The flight attendants smiled politely as they passed him, offering coffee he barely touched. Around him were business travelers buried in laptops, tourists taking selfies, and soldiers in uniform heading back to base. None of them knew that history itself was sitting beside them. As the plane climbed over 30,000 feet, passengers began to notice something unusual on the left side of the aircraft. Through the windows, a squadron of F-35 fighter jets appeared, sleek, silent predators gliding beside the commercial plane. People gasped, phones rose instantly, and whispers filled the cabin. The captain's voice came over the speaker, calm but tinged with awe. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're being escorted by Allied F-35s on a routine maneuver. Nothing to worry about." But it wasn't routine, not today. Out the window, one of the F-35s edged closer, its canopy catching the sun, revealing the pilot inside. Then, the impossible happened. The F-35 pilot raised his hand and gave a sharp salute towards seat 16A. Passengers craned their necks confused. Another F-35 joined the gesture, wings tilting in respect. The old man didn't move at first. He just stared out the window, silent, eyes locked on the fighters. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, faded patch. The edges were frayed, the colors dulled by time. On it, in bold letters, were the words, "Eagle One." A murmur rippled through the cabin as a young soldier sitting in 16B glanced at it. His eyes widened. "Sir Eagle One," he whispered. The old man smiled faintly, like a ghost remembering another life. "Used to be," he said quietly, "long time ago." The soldier's breath caught. He knew the stories every pilot did. Eagle One was the call sign of Colonel Jack Reynolds, a legend from the skies, a man who had flown over 200 missions in hostile territory. The man who, decades ago, had saved an entire squadron by taking his crippled jet into the storm to draw enemy fire. His aircraft never made it back, and the world had assumed him gone. The F-35 pilots outside hadn't been doing a routine escort. They had spotted his name on the manifest. A name that had lived in the hallways of every airbase, etched in gold on memorial walls. "Sir," the young soldier stammered, standing up. "Permission to," but he couldn't finish. His throat tightened as the realization spread through the passengers around them. The old man gave a small nod, as if granting an unspoken request. The cabin fell silent, and for the first time in years, Jack Reynolds felt the weight of memory pressing on his chest. The radio chatter between the F-35 pilots crackled quietly through the cockpit speakers, unheard by the passengers. "Confirm, Eagle One aboard civilian transport." "Repeat, Eagle One confirmed." "Copy that. Request permission for fly." "By salute." "Granted. Give him the sky." The formation of jets adjusted, moving into perfect symmetry, wings slicing through clouds as they passed by the commercial plane in a ceremonial arc. Inside, passengers pressed their faces to the glass, watching in stunned silence as the F-35 dipped their wings in honor. The captain's voice returned, quieter this time, almost reverent. "Ladies and gentlemen, that salute wasn't for us. It was for one of the greatest aviators who ever lived. Colonel Jack Eagle One Reynolds is on board today." The applause started softly, a few claps from the back, then spread until the whole cabin filled with sound. Some stood, some saluted, some simply watched with tears in their eyes. The old man looked down, embarrassed but touched. He had never liked attention. For him, the sky had always been about duty, not glory. But seeing those F-35's machines built on the technology he helped pioneer, dancing in tribute high above the world, made something stir inside him. The young soldier beside him wiped his eyes. "Sir, they teach us about you in training. You were the reason I became a pilot." Jack chuckled softly. "Son, I was just trying to bring my boys home. That's all any of us ever wanted." The flight continued, calm and wordless. The F-35s eventually broke formation, banking away with one last synchronized roll before disappearing into the horizon. The passengers returned to their seats, but the silence carried a kind of sacred weight. Nobody would forget what they had witnessed. When the plane landed, the cabin crew waited as everyone disembarked, leaving one man behind in seat 16A. As he stood to leave, the captain came out from the cockpit and saluted him. "Sir, it's an honor to have flown with you." Jack nodded, eyes tired but bright. "You keep the skies safe, Captain. That's all the honor I need." Outside, on the tarmac, a group of airmen stood waiting, their uniforms crisp, their posture straight. Word had spread ahead of him. As the old veteran stepped out, the entire line snapped to attention. Their hands rose in perfect unison. The air was still, the world quiet. The old man simply gave a small, dignified nod and kept walking. He didn't need words. The salute was enough. Somewhere far above, another formation of F-35 streaked through the clouds, carving contrails in the fading light, a tribute that reached from one generation of warriors to the next. And as the sun dipped low on the horizon, its last rays glinting off the runway, it was as if the sky itself whispered a final salute to the man who once ruled it. Seat 16A was empty now, but the legend of Eagle One would fly forever. The sound of the engines was steady and calm as Flight 273 cut through the afternoon sky. The world outside the windows was painted in silver clouds and sunlight, the kind of peaceful scene that makes passengers sink into their own thoughts. In seat 16A sat an old man, quiet, calm, unremarkable to the casual eye. He wore a faded jacket, boots that had seen years of wear, and a simple cap that carried no emblem. He didn't talk much, didn't move much, just looked out at the endless blue with the kind of gaze only someone who truly knew the sky could have. Around him, people were lost in the noise of everyday life. Children laughing, businessmen typing, soldiers chatting. No one paid attention to the man in 16A. To them, he was just another elderly traveler. But fate had something different planned that day, something that would silence every voice on that plane and remind everyone aboard that legends don't always live in stories. Sometimes they sit quietly among us. The plane had reached cruising altitude when the first shadow appeared alongside the fuselage. Passenger near the window gasped, pointing. Another joined, then another. Soon half the cabin was whispering as a formation of F-35 fighter jets came into view, sleek and powerful, flying in perfect formation just beside the commercial aircraft. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady but edged with something that felt like disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We have a military escort on our left side. This appears to be a scheduled air exercise, nothing to worry about." But that wasn't true. There was no scheduled exercise. The F-35 pilots weren't just flying by chance. They were there for a reason sitting quietly in seat 16A. The lead pilot had noticed a name on the civilian flight manifest earlier that morning while reviewing radar identification. The name had made him pause, his breath catching in his throat. Colonel Jack Reynolds, it read. The name wasn't just familiar, it was legendary. Jack Reynolds was once known by his call sign, Eagle One, a name that lived in every corner of the Air Force. Decades ago, he had led a squadron deep into enemy airspace, saving dozens of pilots in a near-suicidal mission that ended with his aircraft vanishing in a storm of fire and smoke. They thought he'd been lost forever, and his name was carved into memorial walls as one of the greatest heroes to ever touch the sky. But somehow, quietly, he had survived, retired, aged, and disappeared into civilian life, leaving the glory behind him. Now, Unknowingly, he was flying once more beneath the very sky that had once belonged to him. As the F-35s drew closer, passengers pressed against the windows, snapping photos, murmuring in awe. Then something happened that froze everyone in their seats. The lead F-35 tilted slightly to the side, its pilot raising a gloved hand to his helmet and offering a salute toward the passenger cabin. A few seconds later, the other F-35s followed, each dipping their wings in perfect unison. A mid-air salute, reserved only for those who had earned the deepest respect. Inside the plane, the young soldier sitting next to the old man stared wide-eyed, realizing who sat beside him. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Sir, are you Eagle One?" The old man turned his head, his lips curling into a faint smile. "Used to be," he said quietly, "a long time ago." The soldier's heart pounded. His training, his instructors, the history books, all of them spoke about this man. The pilot who led the impossible mission, the man who never asked for recognition. "Sir," he whispered, his voice barely holding. "Those F-35s, they're saluting you." Jack Reynolds looked out the window, his tired eyes softened as he watched the jets glide beside the plane. "Those are good pilots," he murmured, "better than we ever were." In the cockpit, the captain received a direct radio message from the lead F-35. The pilot's voice was calm but carried deep emotion. "Confirm Eagle One is aboard. Request permission for ceremonial fly. By." The captain swallowed hard. Permission granted. The F-35s broke formation slightly, then repositioned themselves into a perfect diamond shape. They soared past the commercial plane, banking in a majestic roll, sunlight flashing off their wings. Passengers erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the cabin. Even the crew, moved to tears, paused their duties to watch history unfold outside their windows. The captain came over the speaker again, his voice heavy with awe. "Ladies and gentlemen, that display you just witnessed wasn't a training exercise. It was a salute to Colonel Jack Eagle One Reynolds, one of the greatest aviators to ever serve." The applause grew louder. Passengers turned toward seat 16A, clapping, some saluting, others simply staring in silence. The old man bowed his head slightly, humbled, his eyes glistening. He had never cared for ceremonies, but something in that moment touched him deeply. For decades, he had lived quietly, never speaking of his past. But now, seeing the next generation of warriors honor him, he felt something stir within the same pride that once carried him through the clouds. The young soldier beside him was trembling, eyes wet. "Sir, it's an honor to sit next to you." Jack smiled faintly. "The honor's mine, son. Keep flying, keep them safe." The rest of the flight continued in reverent silence. The F-35 stayed alongside until the plane began its descent, then broke formation one by one, each dipping their wings a final time before vanishing into the horizon. When the wheels touched down and passengers stood to leave, the old man remained seated for a moment, lost in thought. The world outside had changed the planes, the people, the wars, but the sky, the endless sky, was still the same. As he stood to leave, the captain came to the cabin door, standing at attention. "Sir, it's been an honor to have you on my flight." Jack nodded, placing a firm hand on the captain's shoulder. "You fly safe, Captain. The sky belongs to you now." When he stepped out of the plane, the sun was low, painting the runway in gold. A small group of airmen stood at the edge of the tarmac, waiting. Word had spread before he even landed. As he walked past, every one of them straightened and saluted. The old man stopped, turned his head, and returned the salute slowly, the weight of years in his gesture. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The respect in the air was enough. Somewhere high above, an echo of jet engines roared faintly in the distance, as if the sky itself was offering a final tribute. Seat 16A was empty now, but the story of the man who once owned the skies, Eagle One, would live on forever, written not in medals or headlines, but in the hearts of every pilot who ever dared to fly.